Welcome, everyone, to the 33rd episode of Signs, Planets, and Stellar Rhythms. I am your host and navigator through this particular journey in regards to the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction happening this month, April 2022. I'm Erik Roth, shamanic astrologer, and I'm happy to go into this material. This is a really big event astrologically, and something that we all can experience in our own lives as we get through the month. In fact, this is a conjunction that's been building up for quite a while over this year, especially in March as Jupiter moved closer and closer to Neptune in the sky. So let's go into what this all means and find out more information about what Jupiter-Neptune is and how we can connect with it in our own lives, and some little history about it too. So here's the major bullet points on the features of this episode, the 33rd episode. Conjunction timeline, which we'll go over, the Pisces archetype, the qualities of this conjunction, and past conjunctions of Jupiter and Jupiter-Neptune. In fact, we got a little misspelling there, but past conjunctions of Jupiter and Neptune and Pisces, as well as a look at that year that the last time this happened. And that's towards the end of this episode. So if you're watching this and you take a break in between and then come back and watch the other part later, that's when I start to cover that particular information there in this episode. So let's take a look. There's a lot here, or some here that I covered in a episode last year that was about Jupiter and Pisces. So Jupiter is in its last month and a half in the sign of Pisces before it moves into Aries, which we'll have another video just on Jupiter and Aries. But so you can also refer to the Jupiter and Pisces episode from 2021 that covers some more material about the Jupiter transit through Pisces. And again, we're also talking about Pisces, so there's a lot of correlation between those two episodes. But in this case, we're bringing in Neptune more into this particular episode. All right, so Jupiter's role in shamanic astrology is associated with expansion, one's vision quest path or path of enlightenment. It also gives us a preview of more opportunities for transpersonal and ecstatic states of being. This is in relation to the sign of Pisces, but also greater heart cognition of empathy and compassion. Again, Jupiter acts as an expansive agent, something that brings in a certain acceleration and whatever that sign is, the qualities of that sign coming through or archetype coming through. And also in shamanic astrology, Jupiter it's resonant with the sign of Sagittarius, and Neptune is resonant with the sign of Pisces. Traditionally, before Neptune was discovered, Jupiter was resonant with, they looked at it as a rulership. Jupiter ruled Sagittarius, and both Sagittarius and Pisces. So there's going to be some of that correlation that's coming through there. It's like at least for Neptune, it's in its home. For Jupiter, it's definitely very aligned with that particular sign, especially due to its spiritual and divination qualities into that sort of that mystical realm of possibilities there. Jupiter is also known as the year star, something I covered a little bit more in the previous episode about Jupiter and Pisces a year ago. So if you want to learn more about that, I've got the slide up here. Jupiter typically spends about a year per sign, but there are some years where it splits time between two signs, like it's doing in 2022, and it did a year ago between Aquarius and Pisces in 2021. So, but next year, it's going full into 2023. It's going full into Taurus after it passes through Aries, and then it'll just, as far as not the calendar year specifically, but a full 12 plus months in that particular sign. So that'll be covered in, of course, in future episodes. And the reason it's called, the reason of the year star, where that term was discovered, was originally by Chinese astronomers, and based on the research, at least the reference from Homer Dubs in 1958, and his article that appeared in the Journal of the American Oriental Society, number 78, Beginnings of Chinese Astrology. All right, so let's take a look at what Pisces represents. Qualities of this archetype: highly empathic, compassionate, a connection to the source. So it has a really deep connection to source. It really feels a lot. In fact, it feels so much it sometimes it can't stop feeling. Loves without bias, well suited for the healing arts, can merge completely with another and spirit, is a creator of safe space. It has some of these things in common with Cancer, with the exception of Cancer being much more family oriented and regards to responsibility. But for Pisces, responsibility is not in the vocabulary. It simply goes off of what it feels. Selfless service and giver to others. So it feels it wants to give, and so it gives in that way by being of service out there. It is the great dreamer and the creator of ecstatic experiences. Now, there's a shadow side to this, which can also be drummed up with this Neptune-Jupiter conjunction here. Can be a martyrdom, no boundaries, basically just being a sieve for everything and all things, like everything comes through it. It's a giant sponge, it absorbs it all. It could be indecisive, addicted to dreams and escapism, overly comfortable with grief, suffering, and self. So it can take it on and almost as if that's all it knows. So it just keeps taking that on in its life as if it were, that's its familiarity. That's where its ground is until it feels something else. So losing identity through the feelings. So it's like taking on the feelings of others and the beliefs and the psychic energies and the issues of others, and until it can overwhelm Pisces, where it can literally shapeshift into a new identity through that extreme empathy. Reality meaning nothing. Basically, that relates to the whole escapism and wanting to escape reality, because Pisces is extremely sensitive, and it can, again, be overwhelming to experience all of that. And so it will react and try to, whether through different entertainment or plant medicine or emotional states, it will find a way to escape. And that's not really of course, on a, temporarily that might be okay, but if it's done on a permanent level, that's where the problems really arise. And yeah, I'm overwhelmed by environment, reality, and being an emotional psychic sponge, which we covered. So these are some of the things, like for people that were born with Neptune or with personal points in the sign of Pisces, Sagittarius, Gemini, or Virgo, especially in the 20-degree range. Anywhere from like 21, 22 to 24 to 26 degrees in that zone of Pisces. This is really going to be a personal transit for you all. And so just be aware those conjunction squares and oppositions are going to be really potent for this particular transit. All right, well, let's bring in Neptune, introduce Neptune. And Neptune takes about 165 years or so to move back to its original sign. It takes about roughly 14 years to move from one sign to another sign, 13 to 14 years, depending on its retrograde loop. So what does it stand for? Well, in shamanic astrology, Neptune is a potent symbol for the celestial or upper world. It brings qualities in an underlying current of nonlinear time and mystical vibrations. Neptune orients us beyond material reality into the land whereupon dreams and divination meld together. It can bring in a Pisces-like feel with an expanded heart and sensitivity with our feelings. But with that activity, it can also challenge our sense of reality through confusion and freedom from that reality. Neptune can act as a dissolving agent as well to our attachments, goals, and other plans while introducing a feeling of being lost. Things are more transitory and uncertain in general. It is through Neptune, however, where grace can be discovered. It is a planet that can open minds if we allow ourselves not to resist or force things to happen at all costs. So it's essentially, there's a certain sense of letting go, of doing the walkabout, of stepping in beyond our linear time into something where, say, if we're in a space of transition or we're holding on to something that's not working and we keep pushing hard for it. And if we're in a big Neptune transit, this is where they can serve us by letting that go, by, in fact, we would transit ourselves beyond what that is. Not to say that we completely abandon it forever, but we let it go for a while. We move away from that particular thing that's maybe creating toxic harm for us, or maybe that we're going in life direction that we thought was our goal, or that we thought was the best course for us, but it turns out something's wrong, something's amiss. And so Neptune can teach us to be more curious and to have doubts and to expand and open our minds and our hearts to something more beyond. On April 12th, this is the big Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. It happens at 23 degrees, 58 minutes of Pisces. So we can call it just 24 degrees Pisces. And this is a one-day conjunction, but Jupiter and Neptune have been within 5 degrees with each other since March 18th, and will continue all the way until May 9th, just about when Jupiter moves into Aries on back just the very next day on May 10th. And then during the retrogrades and then returning, this is in the fall of 2022, they are within 7 degrees between October 27 and December 16th of 2022. So there's another round of this after we get past April or in early May of Jupiter and Neptune kind of coming in together, because Jupiter will retrograde back into Pisces in October and November and December. And then before it finally moves out of that. And what's fascinating about it, it almost gets to within 6 degrees. So it kind of just a few minutes before 6 degrees. So I use within 7 because that's captures all of that range. And just as a reminder, anything within 10 degrees from a shamanic perspective can be looked at as a conjunction. Not, of course, the exact conjunction, but from our vantage point, when we're seeing two objects in the sky, they are generally close together if they're within 10 degrees. So from a visual, experiential, shamanic perspective, these two planets have been hanging around each other for quite a while, and they will have another round of that when we get into the mid to late fall. All right, so interpretation of what this conjunction period is. Well, this assists us with ecstatic experiences of the heart and spirit beyond the mind, healing for others, migrating away from reality and its complexities, dreaming into the connection with the divine heart, and opening empathy without egoic judgment. Pisces is one of the two traditional signs that Jupiter resonates with, as I mentioned earlier, and Neptune has a strong resonation with the sign of Pisces. So together, this is amplified by the pairing of these two planetary bodies. This conjunction is also about being of service. Pisces is a powerful giver sign, and their higher level of activity involves bringing spirit into matter, either through the awareness and working with the patterns, or through healing and being where help is needed to be. Also in the middle world, it is a time where illusion, fantasy, confusion can all dance together, making it challenging to truly know what is really going on. Things can dissolve as easily as they seem to resolve. So, what's happening in the world and even in our lives, whether we're in a personal cycle, with Jupiter, Neptune, it's more acutely felt. But, even when we're not in one of those, the world around us is experiencing this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. And this is actually playing a role on a here where I live in the United States, because the U.S. Every country has its own natal chart. The U.S. is experiencing a Neptune opposition, so meaning that Neptune is at the time that the U.S. was born, Neptune was in the sign of Virgo, and so Neptune's now in that space where it's opposite. So that's a big hallmark cycle. At the very same time, the US is in a Pluto return. So this is adding to this very bizarre and otherworldly transition that the United States is going through right now, including the death rebirth. There's some Chiron effects to this with our own wounds, original wounds of this nation. This is all coming alive prominently right now in the United States. But we can also see around the world this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction and how things are dissolving around us, meaning we don't work, everything is uncertain. And uncertainty for a lot of us can make us uncomfortable, can bring anxiety. You know, there's our minds, our egos strive for security. And Neptune is a planet that tends to, you know, break open the gates through its dissolving agency. And so it doesn't, we don't feel like we are fully secure. Is the gate there? Is it not there? You know, is it a mirage? What is it really? So it's up to us to navigate that in a way that we're actually working with that. So for example, ways that we can do is just continue to be open to other possibilities, other ways that things can end. You know, even with the economics, the social government and political structures on the world stage. This is where what's happening today. Yeah, there are things that were seeded a while back, but there are things, it's all coming into this messy transformation right now that it's going to continue to evolve over these next few years. So we'll get an opportunity to keep participating and seeing what is happening out there. Okay, so I also looked up the Sabian symbol of this conjunction, which ends up being 25 Pisces. So it's called the Purging the Priesthood. And I find this fascinating because it has a lot to do with belief and truth and principles and all of that. So the key words of this are revealing the truth of people for who and what they truly are. It lists and they're cutting people off. So basically like, oh, wait, no, you're not the truth. So we're, you know, it's just almost like the judgments are thrown around here. You know, things that don't measure up, there's redundancies, payouts at the end of employment, opting out for moral reasons, holes left where someone took up a lot of space. And I got that first paragraph from Linda Hill's Sabian Symbols, Sabian Oracle 360 from that particular book. Now, my consideration here about this, because to me, it appears to be living up to one's faith and spiritual path while sorting through those who may appear to have the truth, but may not actually possess it or even live in their own truth. So sort of the truth purveyors out there, or the ones who purport to be that, or you know, this is in a sense different from the actual facts that are going on, but something that's like, oh, well, that's true, or no, that's true. A complete argument of that. A lot of this started, you know, many years ago, but the heat really got turned up into the whole truth thing back when Saturn was in Sagittarius, and fundamentalism around truth, and that was in the mid 2010s when that was happening there. So something we can go back and look, you know, 2014, 2015, 2016, that range. That's kind of that zone where when Saturn was in Sagittarius. At the same time, when it had it was squaring Neptune in that area as well. So it was just a fascinating time in that. The symbol is also more about dissolving an expression of Pisces and Neptune, of what we may think is reality, but ends up being a mirage. So it could lead to rash judgments and a purging of what can't measure up within and without. So it's in the time in which we're living in right now, and all that's going on. Not just, of course, the war that Russia perpetrated in Ukraine, and the growing war crimes that are showing up there, but there's more beyond that are being revealed. And so I don't think we'll really know all that is going to unfold here for years to come. Probably not until Neptune moves out of Pisces. Jupiter, of course, will move out of Pisces for about 5 months when it enters Aries, but it still moves back into Pisces. So we're not out of that zone quite yet. What does it look like in the sky with the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction? Well, it sits right here between the Fish constellation here, which is below Pegasus. This is in the early morning sky as of April 12th. And we see the Water Bear constellation right over here on the right side. Mars and Venus and Jupiter are all visible in this early morning sky. Neptune's too dim and too far away to be seen. It's about 8th magnitude. So the naked eye can only get up to about 5.5 to 6 at its most maximum. You got to have really keen eyesight and be under the most perfect conditions possible to go and actually look at it between a 5.5 to 6 range. Uranus can sometimes get in that space. Vesta definitely can at times in its orbit and relationship to Earth. But Neptune is never able to get to that particular brightness. But this is the area in which it's showing up, this between Jupiter and Neptune here. And this little kind of this X here, this is where the March equinox is. This is the ecliptic here, where the planets are kind of hanging around. And then this blue line here is the projected equatorial line through here. And that's when the sun, just back a couple of weeks ago, moved from the southern hemisphere into the northern hemisphere. So north of the equator, creating spring in the north and fall in the south. So this is happening only about 5-ish degrees from the equinox point. So it's a kind of a fascinating position for this to happen here. Now, where is the boundary of Pisces? So when Jupiter first moved into Pisces back in 2021, May 13th, and also again in December 28th, 2021, this is where it was, right at the edge of the Water Bear, which astronomers still call Aquarius. So this is the whole thing about the age of Aquarius. It's connected to this particular constellation, but the equinox has not yet drifted into the stars of that zone. It's getting closer and closer, but it hasn't quite gotten there. And then you can see here, this is the goldfish on that other side there. All right, let's look at some other pieces of information here about the Jupiter-Neptune Pisces. Some dates to look at. Here's all the dates, and these are the dates I certainly covered in the Jupiter and Pisces video a year ago, and talked about what this all, these different time periods where Jupiter transitions into that particular sign. Neptune's been in Pisces since 2011 and will go on until 2026. But when we say a planet moves into a sign, especially the outer planets, for 1 year, it's not that in that transition it's going to spend the entire year in that particular sign. A lot of times, like planets like Pluto and Neptune and Uranus, and sometimes even Saturn and Jupiter, spend time in 2 different signs when they're transitioning from one sign to the next. And that happened in 2011 with Neptune and will happen in 2026. But we're not too far away from Neptune's transition into the sign of Aries when it gets into that space in 2026. So it actually starts to begin to move into that. It gets pretty close there in 2025 as well. So other dates to look at here, the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction I've got listed here. April 12th, it's within 1 degree between April 7th and 17th. So it's pretty kind of the epicenter there, that 11-day-ish period with Jupiter and Neptune. Neptune conjuncts Mars at about 25 degrees on May 17th. So Mars is making its way through there as well. In fact, Venus, I didn't list Venus's conjunction here, but it conjuncts Neptune in April. Neptune squares Mars 3 times later this year and once in March of 2023. October 11th of 2022, November 19th of 2022, and March 14th. This is a part of when Mars is in Gemini, and this will be part of another video altogether about the Mars and Gemini transit, which is a really big deal for the late summer, fall into the winter of 2023. So essentially from late August 2022 until late March of 2023. That's that period where Mars spends in Gemini, and it's going to be the dance squares with Neptune during this time. So that also activates Neptune, something that bears watching. We'll, of course, be doing a whole video about that Mars and Gemini transit. So what other information I can provide? This is something I shared with in the Jupiter in Pisces video. Jupiter has a synodic cycle. Its main synodic cycle is 83 years, meaning that from one exact point to the other exact point on, in relation to the sun and Earth. So it takes about 83 years. And this relationship, there's correlations with both Neptune and Uranus during this time. So this year, Uranus is in Taurus, Neptune in Pisces, and Pluto in Capricorn. But if we go back to 1938 and 39, Uranus was also in Taurus and Jupiter was in Pisces. You go back to 1855 to 56, then we have Jupiter in Pisces with Neptune again. In fact, that's the last time they were in conjunction. There's another slide I'm going to talk about that one. But Uranus and Pluto were in Taurus. So these are date periods that have correlations. You might say they kind of time in the past kind of helps inform what's going on today. So these time periods that I'm listing off are sharing their wisdom, if you will, of that time period. So, the shadow and the light, both throwing it into this future moment here that we're living in. And then, of course, you go back to 1772, 73, also Uranus in Taurus and Neptune in Virgo. That was so where Neptune is opposite where it is today. And Pluto, that was the last time Pluto was in Capricorn during the late 1700s there, 1770s in particular. So we could look at these different time periods, and Uranus and Jupiter, when a person gets into their early 30s, 83 to 84 years old, that's when they get their synodic Jupiter return, but they also get a Uranus return. So there's this really big deal that happens when a person's in that age range. And so this is just if you just go back the calendar, rewind it a bit, and you can find these planetary correlations. And many of these periods led up to, especially with the Jupiter Pisces and Uranus Taurus, there was kind of leading up to various kinds of social political tensions and wars, including World War II, the Civil War, and the Revolution. Doesn't mean this is all going to happen once again. Obviously, this year we've got a war in Ukraine, but there's been certainly other wars. I mean, we've had across the globe that's been ongoing for many years, some of them. So this doesn't mean this is the cause of it. This is just a pattern, like something is coming into an intent that's repeating, and we're looking at that and we're seeing like, okay, what's really going on here? What were the seeds that were going on during the lead up to World War II, to the Civil War in the US, as well as the Revolutionary War in the US? And that's something that we can all look at. And so we can see a lot of these issues are being revisited right now. There was the beginnings of atomic power, and then the sort of the climax of nationalism, and how that got created a really decimated populations across the world around World War II, and issues around the formation of the United States, all the social issues and the formation of the Constitution, and what was excluded from that, because it was only essentially white landowners that were able to really have a lot of these, quote, freedoms, including the right to vote. So this is something we're all coming back around and going, hey, wait a minute, what can we do to make this better? What can we do to improve it? What innovation can we have? In fact, Saturn, being in Aquarius right now, is a big player around this, and Jupiter's transit through Aquarius last year was another sign around that. So that I feel like there's a different kind of a vibration happening now than there was during these time periods here. But still, there's threads that carry all the way back to those times. And then the other one I really want to look at is the last time Jupiter and Neptune were conjunct was in 1856. And so there's this 165, 66 year revolution of Jupiter and Neptune in the same conjunct in the same sign. And in this case, we're looking at Pisces. Back then it was at 18 degrees, 13 minutes Pisces. And this year it's nearly at 24 degrees Pisces. So during 1856, this is a fascinating one that I when I was looking at this, the end of the Crimean War with the Treaty of Paris, there was a major war that was fought between Russia and some other versus some European powers, and including the now long defunct Ottoman Empire, which is now roughly modern day Turkey. Ukraine was divided up, and they battled over it. Including the Crimean Peninsula was one of the biggest battles that they fought there, which was why they call it the Crimean War. So we're coming back into we could see Ukraine being an incredible, horrific battleground right now in modern times here since February 24th of 2022. That's still ongoing as of this recording this video. So the correlations are there, and there's a pattern repeating. So it was also a turning point in the Taiping Rebellion in China, and there was a second Opium War that began in China. Pisces, this is a lot of that was about, the Taiping Rebellion was about beliefs, and it was started by a man that believed himself to be the son of Jesus and our brother Jesus. It was one of these, like, I am the Messiah, and I'm going to conquer all the sinners in China, and they nearly succeeded. But then in 1856 was kind of a turning point in that, starting where the Chinese ruling family started to make progress against the rebellion, and over the years that began to decrease. So there were some major battles that were fought that helped decide the end of that war in the coming years. And the Second Opium War, which was involving Britain, a disagreement between Britain and China, and China lost that particular war, and they lost the first one as well. And it was an unfair agreement to China, because Britain was essentially imposing a lot of rules onto China, what they could or cannot do. And that war ended just about 4 years later in 1860. Again, there's a correlation between Pisces and even drugs and beliefs, and this we can take it to extreme levels. And then this is an interesting one: a major political party, United States. That's when it became the original Republican Party in the 19th century. They were the ones who were the abolitionists. And so that was growth over a growing movement of segments of the United States population that did not like slavery at all, and they wanted it to end. And so, of course, that created a lot of tension that had been building up for decades. But 1856 was one of those years where it started to really come into form. So we can see conjunctions between Jupiter and Neptune since 1900, all these different times. And every so often you get 3 Jupiter-Neptune conjunctions that happened in 1919, 1920, in 1971 when it was in Sagittarius, and in 2009 in Aquarius, when Jupiter and Neptune in Aquarius. And then it won't happen, the next time Jupiter and Neptune are in conjunction is not for another 13 years, and that'll happen in the sign of Aries. And then the one after that is 2047 to 2048, which happens 3 times in the sign of Taurus. So you can look at the last time Neptune was in Pisces as well, between 1848 and actually that should be 1848 and 1862, not 1962, 1862. So we have this, these are just some bullet points, some things that if you wanted to research on your own, to take a look at the sort of the correlations around the qualities that Pisces brings in and Neptune and Jupiter when they're in this sign and what shows up. Again, the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction isn't the entire thing of what the theme of 2022 is, but it is one of the themes, one of the big things. The other one is sort of the continuation of this Saturn-Uranus square, and that's that changes the game of what Jupiter and Neptune bring in right now. And then we have some other things going on, like the Mars transit in Gemini at this in the last third of the year. So this is something that bears watching, all of this kind of coming together like this at this particular time here in 2022. Well, thank you all for being a part of this. As my astrologer, I do personal readings, classes, events, and astrophotography. And my website is spiralnexus.com. Shamanic Astrology was founded by Daniel Mario, and you can find a lot of information on their website, shamanicastrology.com, and I do teach there sometimes. Please subscribe if you like this, and as well as hit like. And I also have a podcast called Rhythm of the Stars. You can check that out as well, where podcasts are found for the most part. And yeah, please feel free to comment any suggestions, any thoughts of ideas of what I can maybe talk about in the future. I'm always open to different suggestions, and I'm happy to share more. And one of my next videos will be Jupiter and Aries, but there'll probably be something I create before that. So stay tuned for more, and I look forward to seeing you in the very near future. Be well, everyone.